Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer. Dion, I think, has got a short demo prepared for you today, but otherwise he is here to take your questions. Speaking of which, you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Why, yes, I am. Can you hear me okay? Dave?
Dion, I am not. Oh, there we go.
Are you hearing me okay?
Coming through a little quiet.
Okay. I'll increase the gain. I'm playing with a new mic, so bear with me here.
All right.
Let's try the gain here. Is this any better, or is it coming through better there?
I can still hear it, but let me ask the audience. What do you guys think? Type into the questions box, whatever. Loud and clear? All right, everyone thinks it's loud and clear. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, Dave.
Sorry, totally.
Dave, are you having an episode again? You know, it's like,
I'm having one of my little spells, Dion. Yeah.
Dion, I can't hear you over the other voices in my head.
Terrible. Well,
it is.
Thank you, Dion. You're welcome.
After you, sir.
All right. Nope, that's it. I'm just ready to take it away. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And you should see your dialog box there. And there's your screen.
Right. Well, and this is a week of experimentation, so bear with us. I got a new mic. I like this one. It's a Blue Yeti. I had a small one, but I've got the big one now, and I think hopefully that sounds a little better. But also, I've been playing with screen resolution because I actually after last week's demo, I said, hey, you know what? It was a cool demo. I'm going to wrap it up into a video just so we can package it and put it up on Alpha Anywhere, our Alpha software, etc. But I realized it's really small and I had to do a lot of zooming in there. So I've been playing with it, and I hope that you'll see that our screen is a little bit larger, and hopefully you don't have to get out your Mr. Magoo glasses this week to kind of see what the heck is going on the screen.
Well, it looks nice and crisp. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just I just altered the scaling on when I'm doing normal, you want a lot of screen space, but when you're in here, it's got to do it. So look forward to hearing from anybody what they think, like, dislike, etc. And we're always open because we're here for you, and our whole life is focused around how do we make you more successful. And the best way we make you successful is for you to get off your tails and send us questions, which you can do right now by just going to the GoToWebinar control panel. And in there, in the questions section, in your questions. And guess what? If you're entering a question right now, you're too late. No, I mean, you're later, because we had a great question come in from one of our esteemed developers that I'm going to cover today. And that's what we like to see. It gives us the time to kind of think through things, put it together, and make it great. So, but again, do put your questions in. We'll have lots of times for Q&A, and we want to kind of help you out any way we can. And if we can, by answering your questions, we will do so. So with that, what I want to talk about today is twofold. One is just amazing, cool stuff happening in the pre-release stuff. And I want to point out a couple. We're not going to cover them today, but I kind of want to show you what I like to call them the Oompa Loompas, have been very busy in the back office there working on different things. It's just crazy how hard they work and how much they do. With such an incredible team. But I wanted to highlight a cool new feature that was just released recently on the list control, which really allows you to increase your look and feel of your list control. There's been a lot of updates on the styling, so if anybody's having any problems with styling, check out the new pre-release. There's been a lot of little fixes, adjustments, etc., to make it more stable and more useful there. But I also wanted to highlight a couple really amazing things. And this just came out hot off the press this morning, is the two-factor authentication. Now, we don't have a demo because it just came out this morning, but we wanted to let you know that we take security at Alpha very, very seriously. And one of the key aspects of security now is two-factor authentication, the ability to, say, ping someone on their SMS, phone, etc., to them to confirm that they're the real person. So in this latest is the new pre-release. And again, it is pre-release, so we always note, do not use this for production. Feel free to download it, play with it. You'll see real quick, I have two virtual machines. This is my pre-release virtual machine, and this is where I do all my new stuff. And then this is my production one that is the latest production one. And I avoid trying to go to a pre-release for any production work unless it just absolutely has to happen. So that's a good method for me. I'm on a Mac. I can put together a couple virtual machines, but there's a lot of virtual machine capabilities on laptops. Also, by the way, you can get a laptop for $200. You can go get one and set up a pre-release on there and just use it for testing the pre-releases. It's really not meant for development, etc. But if you want to kind of play around, that's often a really powerful way to do it. So with that, back to the point here is that we have our pre-release. We have two-factor authentication. It's using the Google Authenticator app, which is a very nice feature capability. It's linked into our extended user information table. It's all built in there. It's really going to be very helpful and very simple for people to take their security and really lock it down to the next level. So again, brand new, not guaranteed to be perfect yet because we're still continuing, but we like to give these out so people can start learning about it, experimenting with it, and kind of putting into. There's a template that's now available called Security Framework Two-Factor Authentication Preferences to help you set your preferences up and your other pieces here. And this goes through all the details here of how that works, including some of the new Xbasic features, etc. Plus, there are some sample login components you can use and help these other pieces here. So there's a lot of really fun stuff that's built into it. Plus, there's some new A5W commands to help you get work with the authentication. And as always, there's lots of nice little aspects. The switch control gets updated, phone gap, etc. So keep an eye on the pre-release. This really kind of gives you an idea of what's going to be in the next full release. We will be doing a demo. I haven't done a demo of it yet, although my esteemed colleague Nikos did a demo yesterday, and you can go to Transform Tuesday on the map layout, which is cool because list controls can now have a map layout, which is very cool. Very powerful for anybody who's doing geo-oriented type application development. Takes a lot of the work out of it. So we're going to be demonstrating that. Going to target next week to go through a dog and pony and show you guys how that works. And it's really cool. And the list component is very snappy. So it really enhances both mobile and desktop applications. I am going to show you the new alternating row controls in the next colors. It's kind of nice. It's a little simple feature, but if you're doing financial applications, people are used to seeing alternating row colors. So check it out. Security Framework Two-Factor Authentication, lots of new little features, all pre-release. So be judicious in your use of that. And also,
if I could
please.
Sarah has, I've actually just pasted a link I got from Sarah where there's a documentation article, how to install multiple Alpha IDEs on the same machine. We've actually documented that out so they don't step on each other's toes, although I do appreciate having a separate virtual machines lets you set up all kinds of other separate things, separate databases, separate everything. But
I'm just paranoid.
But if you don't want to, right? But if you want to put them on the same machine, you can do it.
You can decide that. So it shows how to do it. You install it. The key is to install it not in your other stuff, into a different location there. The only thing I found, and just be very wary, is that when you launch, you just got to make sure you're in the right environment, because there's some times where you'll double click on, just load the Alpha Anywhere environment and load the workspace into it, because when you double click and load the ALB, the workspace file on the desktop, you got to make sure it's going to load the right one. So you got to just, again, and I think the normal behavior is to open it when you're inside the Alpha development environment, but just be careful, coach, because if you publish a pre-release version on a server that's on a release version, bad things will happen. I love it. That's
or might happen, but not with the new features. Bad things will definitely happen.
Definitely. But I've just historically, it's always caused me a lot of pain and anguish. So it's like in Ghostbusters. It's like, what happens if you cross the streams?
Right. It turned out to be key though in Ghostbusters, but
I know bad things can happen. So anyway, good. Thank you very much, Sarah. I really appreciate it. Yep, and she's adding some more enhancements in there. Cool, so let me go through demo. And again, I'm in my pre-release here. And so I have a list, a very simple list. And this list just connects to a database, and it grabs a few of the fields from it. And then the list layout just has those fields. So very super simple, easy, off to the races we go. But now in list properties, there is a new setting in here called conditional row style. And conditional row style has a enable for alternating row colors. So you can click here, turn it on and off, and you can fix the color. So you can do it one of two ways. So built in for the list for some time now has been conditional computation row styles, meaning like if I want to highlight certain rows with a certain color based on the data in that row, that's been in there for some time. And you'll see when I have this disabled that you'll have server side and client side. But we had a number of people saying, you know, I don't need a conditional. I just want to format it so it looks like a spreadsheet. You know, it's kind of a more alternating row style. And so now there's a new checkbox here because, by the way, you could do some gyrations to kind of get this to work, but you had to kind of do some funky stuff to get the computation to come so it would do it every other row, etc. Now you just click here. Then once you've clicked there, you can go in here and you can pick a color in here. And again, if you haven't played with this, this is our built-in color palette. It's kind of fun, you know, you can kind of play with it here. You can see the different variants of it here. You can also go in here and look at fan decks, and fan decks are nice because they're nice gradients of variants of colors, which is what I'm going to use here. So for instance, I'm going to select that one right, let's say right this one, or that one right here. So it's that kind of color there. Then I'm going to go in here, and then you can select something similar to it right there. Oops, is that, oh, we went there. Okay, so you can, it's got a lot of powerful there. You can also add images there. You can also say palettes. So for instance, and this goes to branding, is that when you have decided what your color scheme should be, you can actually set up a palette here, and therefore your colors are kind of built in. And therefore, when you go to apply them anywhere, you're going to be able to say, oh yeah, that's the color I want to use for this. So it's kind of a handy little tool to do that. But basically, you're just setting your even and your odd row colors there. So now I'm going to save this, do a working preview. And so you'll notice now, we now have a nicely, and hey, that didn't turn out too bad, guys, for just totally guessing here, a nice color scheme. In fact, let's go ahead and make this fill the container. And we'll go back to working preview and do this. There you go. So as you can see, and we can play with like the background, like for instance, I could go in and make the text white so it pops and other pieces there. So there's a lot of fun things you can do from that standpoint there. But this is called alternating colors, and it's available in the list properties under the conditional row style. Again, this existed for this, but now you can enable that and just set some new nice little row coloring in a matter of a few minutes so that your lists look fabulous on your both mobile and desktop applications. So pretty handy little feature. Next week, we'll go over the mapping stuff. That's a lot of fun. Mapping is always entertaining and fun. And that's the first demo. So if you have any questions on that, go ahead and queue them up. I'm not sure, it's pretty simple concepts. There may not be a lot of questions, but you never know. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But what I'd like to do is shift gears here to one of our esteemed colleagues, send out a message regarding the ability to use Xbasic to query and run through a series of rows in a table and do adjustments to them. So I'm going to jump over here. I'm going to go into my Alpha environment. And I'm going to go over here, and I've created a little Xbasic test. And the way I did that is the following: is I went to Xbasic here, clicked New, and selected Xbasic script. Just 6 months ago, you'd have to go to Control Panel, go to the code, and do it here. But just recently, we can now create what are called Xbasic scripts, which are just little simple scripts here in the Web Projects Control Panel. And that's where you want them to be for two key reasons. One is if you're here, you have to make sure to do what's called, you have to set it up so that these files are saved separately, and they're also saved outside of your workspace, sort of outside of your web workspace. These files right here that are in the Xbasic here are all maintained in the same folder, and I've opened up my folder here as my other files in my workspace. So what's great is from a source control, by having it here, then it's going to be checked in and out with source control along with your components and your other elements that are associated with that. So very important is that going forward, you can use the code over here in the older control panel under code, but I highly recommend you go to the Xbasic, go here, create your scripts here, and save them. It just makes life easier. Plus now they're little files on the disk. You can copy them, move them, archive them, whatever you happen to be from there. So in this case, the question was, okay, I want to query and loop through a series of records. Now, there's some interesting things here about that. We'll talk a little bit more detail, is that there's certain behaviors about how Alpha works, and I want to examine, talk a little bit more about that. But let me go ahead and just show you how this works. So this is Xbasic. For people who are not really code-centric, don't worry, you don't do a lot of this, but sometimes you want to do a little Xbasic, and the nice thing is it's very simple. A lot of the commands are in there. And all this little Xbasic script does is it calls the database, queries the database for a series of customers, and then runs through a loop where you can then look at that data, do anything you want with it. So you'll see, and I'll walk you through the script here. First, I'm setting up some basic variables, and these are built-in Alpha types. So this is how you connect to a database. So all the capabilities are built into this, along with here. And these are, if you'll see, it has SQL : : these are all built in. Then I'm building in some of my own. A connection string is C, and the query is C, and this thing called flag is L. So the idea is you're going to need these, because now when I call those things, and you'll see down below, there's some functions I call, it basically leverages all the code that's inside of this basically class library. So we've encapsulated a lot of the complexity for you, so you don't have to deal with it. You don't have to write a lot of code. As you can see, this is a total of maybe 30 lines of code at most to be able to call and walk through a database, and that's all it takes. So after I've dimensioned that, the first thing I'm going to do is give it my connection string. So you'll see it has a very specific nomenclature, which is a named connection string and then the name of that connection string. So basically I'm saying this. Now, if I wanted to, I could just put in the literal connection string there and it would work fine, but I like to use name connection string because then I manage it at a central spot. So if I go to Web Projects Control Panel, Tools, Alpha DAO connection strings, you'll see here are all my different connection strings, and here is the actual connection string. So I could literally copy that and paste it over there, or I want, if I'm going to use one of these, I use that nomenclature of : name, : and then the connection string name. And this is the right way to do it for many different reasons, but because it is the right way to do it, and I've been told that. Okay, so after I've set up my connection string, the first thing Alpha is going to try and do is connect to the database. So it fires what's called a connection open. So remember, connection is an object that has a whole bunch. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. We'll have to take that out in post. There's a whole bunch of built-in functionality here, and one of the functions is called open. So what it does is it actually calls over to the server or wherever your database is, whether it's a SQL database, an Access database, a MongoDB, or whatever it happens to be, and it says, hey, open, and let me know if I can talk to you. And so you pass it the connection string so it knows which one to open. Now, if an error occurs, it's going to throw an error, and this is my error trapping. So, and then you can put in a message and it tells me what the error is, like if it was a timeout or if something, if that database didn't exist or whatever happens to be. So that's the first step, is set up your connection string and then do an open. And if that works fine, then you can start getting into the meat of your program. And this is going to be similar almost every time you do this. So the next thing I do is I set up my SQL query, and I just use standard SQL query, which is select star from. So again, use portable. So you can pass in non-portable. I try to use portable SQL as much as possible, but you can pass in. So for instance, this is a standard select, but I could have put in for a SQL Server an exec and call a stored procedure, or I could call a procedure in there. So it's up to you on how you want to do it, but this is just standard, what query you want to run against your database. And in this case, it's going to return a series of rows for the customer's table and all of the associated columns with that rows. So I've got my connection open. I do that first before I do anything else, because if I don't have a connection, then I don't want to spend time, setting anything else up. I want to just stop and tell the person there's an error and do all the other stuff that's necessary at that point. But if I have a connection, I go ahead and set up my query. I then do what's called a connection.execute. And again, this is a built-in function. And basically what this does is it takes your query and then hands it off to the source, or the target, excuse me, which is your database, and says, hey, database, here's some SQL, please run it. And then it will then attempt to run it, and then that will return a message back to you, and also, if correct, a set of results for the result of that query. And you'll notice that, and I'll come back and talk in a moment, I'm passing in the argument, the SQL query, but I can also pass in arguments, which allows me to sort of make my query dynamic. And I'll show you an example of that in a few moments. I'll set that up and do that. Now, once I have done that, you'll see I do an if. And if this is true, it means that the query worked and no error condition came back from the database. So basically we passed it to the database, it worked, it came back and said, hey, yeah, you're golden, good to go. If it comes back with a false, it means that it detected a failure in terms of the query you were trying to run, or that. And so then you can kick down here to the else part and say, okay, error, generate that and spit it out. And so the idea is that at each step of the way, you're making sure that you have connectivity to the database and that your query runs correctly so you can act on it. And then it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, what was the answer back? So you'll get a result that comes back. You can inspect that. Right now, you could probably just show it to the user if there's or if you're like doing a more robust system, you may write it to a log and maybe try a different technique, or you can make it more resilient. But the bottom line is that the system gives you those hooks to see what happens and then be able to then handle it and take steps necessary. Okay, so connect, define my query, run my query. Now I'm ready to go. Everything came good, so I'm going to. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the result set and put it into what's called a result set. And that's a special type of variable that will hold basically, and think of it as like a little mini table that is in memory that has that information to it. You could reference this result set, but I tend to like to put it into a variable here. Now this is what I'm going to do. So what I want to do is I want to loop through and do something with that result set. So the first thing I do is I do flag. And so how this works is I emit a command that says, give me the next row, in this case, the first row, from the results, and if this will return either true or false. So if this is successful, it returns true. If it's false, or if it's not successful, meaning, for instance, there's no records or I'm at the end of my result set, it returns false. Now with that, I go through a while loop that basically does what I need to do with the row information, and then at the end of that while, it does it to reset that flag, and it just keeps going through their time. So I'm going to run this real quick just to show you what happens here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm inside the script, I'm going to click the lightning bolt. So I've gotten to here, so therefore I've opened my connection string. There were no errors, and in fact you can see success. And then I can walk through here and I'm going to execute that SQL query. That executed correctly, it didn't jump down here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to step again, and I put my stuff in results. So as you can see that it's stuffed a whole bunch of data in there in that RS, including the number of columns and other information. You'll see all that stuff from there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the next row, and you'll notice my flag is true, meaning it found a row of data. If it had not found a row of data, then that would return false. And so now at this point, I can say, while flag, go ahead and do my stuff on this row. Now what's important is that now in the result set, each of my rows is set up properly, meaning I can get it. And I'll show you that in a moment. And then what I do is say, give me the next row. Up, it's good. So I'm going to loop through this, and I'm just going to keep loop throughing it until I get to, and I'm not sure how many customers there are. Should do a count or something like that. Until it returns a false. I guess there's more customers. I think there's like 50 or whatever. Come on. Well, what will happen is this eventually will return false. It will then skip out of this while loop and my code is complete. So that's the core concept. Now what you can do inside here is we've got our stuff in the results set. So in our database, and I'll go ahead and go to my Tools, Database Explorer, and you'll see my customers here. I'm going to show the data. You'll see here is that data coming that's going to be in there. And so I have these different columns: customer ID, company name, contact name, etc. So what happens is Alpha will grab whatever the results of that query are and basically put this information in that result set. So now I can go back in here and I can say test is equal to rs.data, and then in colon, let's see, company name. So how this works is that we took the results and put it in this result set. Now when we go here, it's pointed at a single row. So think of it as a pointer that walks through the table. You'll see that then you can say, okay, I'm pointed at row number 1 on the first time through. So give me the column in there called company name. Now you could also do a numerical. If you knew the order of them, you could also do, for instance, that says, give me column number 1. So you don't have to use the name, but that makes it easier to there. So let's go ahead and run this and see what goes on here. Okay. So now test. There you go. So you'll notice that it's returning this case, the company name for the first row because we're on the first row. Now I'm going to step through. I did the next row. So now I'm pointing at the next row. So now I'm going to go and watch. I'm going to load this test again. And since I'm pointing at the second row, I'm seeing the second value here and on and on. And now I can manipulate it. That becomes data. I can just do whatever. If I need to then do an insert inside, I could then have a different SQL query and a different connection.execute in here and off to the races from there. Now, couple notes on this. First, I want to talk about this. Is very important. Let's say you want to give it a where clause. Now, some people will go, okay, where, let's say, is it company ID? I think it's company ID is equal to, and then they'll go plus, whatever the, company ID is. So let's say I set a company up here and I go dim company ID as C, company ID is equal to alpha key. Okay. And then I want to do here, but I have to be smart about it. I have to go like, okay, it's a text, so I have to do that. So I have to build this query up here. And this is perfectly legal. This is legitimate. Basically, it's going to take this, merge this all together, and that becomes my query. But it's not recommended. And the reason why is a couple things. One is if this information is coming from a user interface, people could do SQL injection attacks, which is really bad, meaning they could, instead of a company ID, it could be another SQL command, and it could expose data. So the way to do this is the following, is you create what's called an argument. So I'll go in here and I'm going to create an argument in here. Okay. So you'll see that I have a colon and a company name ID, and this is called an argument. So what's going to happen is Alpha will merge this string with your argument. So I can go here and I can go args.set, and I give it the name and the value it needs to be. Okay, so what's going to happen is we're defining our query with an argument. When we get to this point, we're going to take our company ID and put it into my args. And then when we execute, we're going to execute that query and give it those args, and then Alpha will merge this together. And it's smart enough to go, oh, this is a string, so I'll put the little single quotes around it and stuff like that. So it does a lot of the hard work for you. So let's go ahead and save this and see if I've screwed it up. Okay, so I'll execute that. I have an error. Let's see. What is the error? What did I do wrong here? Too few parameters. Expected 2. Did I do? What did I do wrong here? Let's see. SQL query. Company ID. Args. Company ID. Company ID. Huh, that should have worked. A classic. Oh, let's see, select start from where. Okay, let me make sure I'm doing the query right. So let me halt this. Let me go into SQL Database Explorer. Customer ID. I'm an idiot. Excuse me.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, let's take that out of context there.
Yeah,
So
kind of...
by the way, I almost always run these in my Navicat. I use Navicat and make sure they're perfect and then come in here and do it. So saves you a lot of time. And so I'm just changing all this to customer ID, etc. But you'll see that that showed when it hit this point here, it said, hey, you know, I sent that SQL query, but the database didn't like it. So immediately it jumped here and then I was able to inspect it. So again, you're going to have control over that process. So by the way, I did that on purpose, right? Right, Dave? So
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
exactly.
It was in the script here. I'm following
it
along.
It was, yes. It was like pretend to screw up at 30 minutes past the hour and then recover gracefully. So, okay, notice it worked this time and then there. And so again, Alpha key. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to the next row. And you'll see, well, I only got one row because I did a where clause, so it's going to jump out of it here. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, and I want to open it up for questions here, is that, again, you want to use arguments. That's super important because then you have a more resilient system. And again, you can pass in arguments to queries, other pieces like that from that standpoint here. There's another key concept I like to throw out. Sometime this rs.next row is a big pain in the tail. And the reason why is for whatever reason, the way it works there, I've found that sometimes it can be a little peculiar, meaning that it will skip the first row or do some other strange kind of scenarios there. So what I will do is if I don't know if I'm going to return a result back, I will usually do two queries. The first query will be essentially like this. I'll do SQL query like equals select. So I'll do this, but I'll do like a count. Okay, so I'll do my first query here, SQL query count. So if I don't know if I'm going to get any results back, I'll do this query because this is going to go really fast. And then I look at the result and say, oh, if I got some results, then I'll do this piece here. So I have to essentially do two connections. Now, there's good and things bad about that. One is you're going to know how many rows are coming back, so you can do a lot of other things with that. The bad is you're making two calls to the database instead of one. So really up to you. But the thing it does for me is then I don't have to worry about this rs.next row. I know how many rows that are going to come back from my query, so I can immediately then set up like a for loop instead of using a while or whatever it happens to be and walk through them accordingly and do everything else here. So just something you might want to consider is doing a to call. And reality in the modern time, you know, databases and these things happen so fast. Unless you have a massive transaction database where you're doing this 1,000 times a second, it doesn't cost you a lot more in performance to do that quick query to see how many counts you have and then bring back the data. Again, it has to do with how this rs.next row, if you go onto the forums and look that up, there's a lot of discussions on the most effective way to write this loop. And I found the most effective way for me is to do a count and then use that to decide what I'm going to do next. Because I found where it will return just one row and it will skip it with rs.next row. And I just, for the life of me, don't know why. It's historical. Again, you can go read on that. So this is just something to consider when you're designing your little scripts. But as you can see, once I've set this up, I just have to do a, you know, basically I go here. I do want to do this here. So I go here and I say Siri query count. And then in here, I can even shorten this by just saying the count is equal to, oops. I don't have to actually put that in a result set. I can just say, give me the first column because the count is going to be the first column. Now I have that count. And then down here, I can do if the count is greater than 0, then, oops, not 9, then indiff, and then put the rest of that stuff in indiff. So that's just something there. So I'm going to stop there because I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but cool, agreed. And let me show you something else. The Xbasic query action also will allow you to do this. The one thing it doesn't do, which is why I showed this method here, by the way, let me show it to you because Sarah brought it up, is if I go to Genie's, there is Xbasic SQL Actions code generator. It returns just JSON data or hierarchical data. And we have update insert. But if I want to do a select and put it in a result set, there's really not a Genie for that. And in fact, that might be a great feature request saying, hey, generate this code and do it for me, including give me the account and stuff like that. So that's a great, I mean, it triggers that. I do this so much because I'm doing little scripts to update tables and doing things in Xbasic callbacks. This is really handy when you're creating code to do, for instance, I want to grab some JSON and populate a view box like we've shown previously, where you're going to maybe use this JSON. Now, once I have this JSON back, I can convert it into a result set, or I'm sorry, into a pointer and do stuff there. But this is pretty easy. I mean, as you can see, I give it the query, I run it, and then I do a loop to grab the stuff out of result set. It's more a little older school, but it's something I just know, so I wanted to share it with you there. So 2 different ways. Again, you could go through and create your own, bring it back as JSON. So you'll go like JSON, it will return JSON, and then you can go my pointer is equal to JSON parse, the JSON that comes back. And then in here, I can go for each item in my pointer, next, do stuff. So, and then in here you can join. So different strokes, but this is how you would do it, is you would use that pre-made code, then you would put it into a pointer variable, and then you could iterate it through. But this is a quick and dirty way to do it here. And I'm going to go ahead and copy all this. I hope this isn't too annoying, and put it in the chat window here. There, more text. So if you want to copy that off and just kind of use it as a basis, don't have to slow down, do screen captures, and try and retype it in, etc. Oh, by the way, real quick, I've been using this Northwind. The reason why is when you go to Tools, Alpha IDE connection strings, if you don't have one, there's a little blue line here that says create it. So if you ever want to do what I do in terms of this one, you just click that little blue line. It will point it to the access database and create this, and then your code will just run because it will basically map to your local access table there. So something to look at. So this week we talked about pre-release version row lists, so we can now do nicely colors on our rows, make it pretty cool. I think that's like Manchester United's colors, or I'm probably offending someone. It does feel like some. Actually, wait, yeah, I should send everybody this, but I'm wearing a Fly Emirates shirt today, and it's kind of a blue and dark blue, but it just feels like a European soccer club for some reason, or I just feel like a hooligan when I see it. I want to go beat someone up or something like that and go to a game. But then also here is the discussion of how to use this code here. And hopefully for the individual who sent this in, which we really appreciate, this gives you enough meat on the bone to execute on what you want to do there. And we really appreciate it. Next week, we'll do the mapping stuff. But now I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague and say, go, Dave.
All right. Well, thanks very much. So we have a couple of questions. We have a couple of questions about your code. Of course, once you answer a question, you get more questions.
This is like extreme programming. Like, don't hit that. There's 2 dots. Stop.
Okay. So you had mentioned earlier on that, if it doesn't connect, right, you don't want to go and do all that other stuff, right? So someone asked, well, I see an error generate command there. Tell me about that. Does that stop it from executing? What goes on with that? Oh, there we go. So maybe you could talk a little bit about on error and what error generate does. And it does work as a team with
very true. I kind of cheated. I didn't actually do the error. So let me go ahead and do this. By the way, while I'm doing it, I use my code library. And this code library is where I can take little snippets of code and save them. And again, we're low code. So there's two ways to low code, is that don't code at all, which we really would like you not to have to do. But sometimes you do. So I'll have these little snippets that I save so that I have the code kind of preset. So one of them here is called error handler. And one thing that's kind of cool about it is you can actually put in like a parameter. And so when it codes, so this is called a code snippet. So there's two parts of it. There is on error go to, classic basic, and here's my error handler point. And then you have an end, and then you have a point where we'll go to, and then some items here. So let me go ahead and copy this here, or cut this out. So I'm wrapping my code here first with an on error. So saying anytime you're running in here, if you get an error, do me a favor and just run out to where that point is. So I'm going to go back down here and I'm going to put it here. Now, a couple things. One, if an error occurs anywhere in here, it's going to go to this location here. Very important is that after my normal code runs, I want to make sure to stop it so it doesn't keep running here. Otherwise, it gets confused. So you have to have an end and then your little go-to statement point there. Now, if I had like a, let's go, equals C. I'm going to put an error in here, and I'm going to go ahead and execute it. And you'll see that I got there, oops. And what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to put a debug here. Okay, so I purposely entered in a coding error, like when I typed it in. And again, why I use the code snippets, because this reduces that. So I'm going to go ahead and execute. And what's going on? Did I do this link here? Oh, I'm in development mode. Let's see. Why is it not popping down there? But that could be there. So anyway, as there. Now, if any error occurs in here, it's going to jump down this location. Now, what's nice is Alpha has a built-in function called error generate, where you, as a user, can force that error to occur. So if it comes back and it fails, it's just going to put the results in this connection call result.text and keep moving on its merry way. It's up to you to look at that. And so the technique I use is I say, oh, there was an error in here. I'm going to go ahead and raise my own error. So I'm basically raising a flag saying there's an error, and it'll go there. So let me go ahead and try this here. And I'm just going to go here and make a screw up here on my connection string. And let's go ahead and give that a run. And you'll notice something. It ran here, and then it hit 22, and then it said, oh, you know, there's an error. So it jumped down here. In fact, let me go ahead and show you that just so I don't go too quick. Let's see, go here. Okay, so I'm going to step through this here. Okay, so I'm right here. I've loaded up my connection string. It's a bad connection string, bad connection string. And then I'm going to run this code here. Watch when I run it. It goes, oh, connection open failed. So I'm going to run code in here. Now in here, I have that, in this case, it's telling me what the error is, but I'm going to go ahead and raise my own error. When I click step, it jumps down into my error handler, and now I can step through it. Now, what this is doing here is that built into Alpha are pre-made error codes. So normal like coding problems like you put one variable in a variable that, like, you tried to do something with a couple of variables and they don't match or something like that. It's going to give you those kind of things there. And then what you can do is that error code gets converted to a message, and then you can find also what script you're running and what line number it occurred on in your script. And then I can do something with it. So you'll see here, and I'll go ahead and pop out here. If I'm on like a UX component, I can throw an eJavaScript and put up an alert with that information. If I'm on like an Xbasic callback, I would just return this back to tell the person what's going on. In my scripting here, I can do what's called a show var, which just throws up a message here. And then also in here, I could log this to a file or a database or whatever. Probably not a database because you can't connect to it, but you could log this to a log file. So that's called error handling. So that's what's going on here, is instead of basically I'm just using the built-in error capability. I could have like gone here and said, oh, I'm going to go ahead and log that to a file and do something else here. But I tend to like normal, consistency. So I use the built-in error generate to say, hey, go ahead and throw a flag and record it through my normal error trapping process. So good question. I appreciate that.
Excellent.
Let me go ahead
Just a
and
quick
copy all the
question.
code again and throw it on there.
Just a quick question about dimensionalizing variables. You just did an example, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, where you used a variable called test, but you didn't dimensionalize it first. Are you allowed to do that?
Yes, you can. It's
That's
very
okay.
forgiving on that.
Perfect.
I think we have to do, you can, by the way, put this in your script. And what this will do is, what it does is that when it runs, it will force you to dimension stuff. There's actually something in to say, make it strict, so you have to dimension it. Did I have, yeah, no, but didn't throw. So I'll have to find out how that goes. But you can actually, if you're, which is a good thing to do, you can say you should always dimension your variables, because it really prevents weird things where you, because Alpha does its best job to figure out, well, what should that variable be? So for instance, when it runs right here, it looks at the data that came back here and said, well, that looks like a character string, so I'm going to make that a string. So it on the fly says create test as a variable for you and set the type to be string. Where you get into problems is that, let's say it returned that as string, but you want to treat it like a date. Then it's really, you should define it as date. And that's very important with like callbacks and stuff from the front end, because everything kind of comes back as strings. And you have to say, well, when I get it back from the UX, I want that to be a date, because then I'm going to manipulate it as a date. So it's good practice to dimension all your variables. And there is this thing called option strict, which allows you to put in your, and it will, essentially it warns you if any items. And I'm not sure what I didn't do here, so I'd have to figure out why. I just haven't used it in a while, but it's just a little tool that will say, hey, I found a variable that you hadn't already dimensioned, and it will give you a warning or an error at that point in time.
Excellent. So we have a question that's sort of similar to the on error go-to question. And the question is as follows. Let's say they have a script which might sometimes generate SQL errors. For example, I'm trying to delete row from a table, but the table doesn't have any rows. Can I trap that and hide that from the user?
Yes, and
the
in
ones
fact,
that are important? Yeah.
Yeah, let me do something real quick. Let me, I'm pausing. And there's one that I used, and actually they kind of fixed this here. See, data not found. Yeah, we got a bunch where, and good, didn't give you there. I'm going to go all the way down here and just show you down at this point here. There were situations where what would happen is we would get a message, and there's actually a way around that now, but I use this very, okay. So I execute a query, and sometimes the database would give me a error, but the error was database could not find that data you requested. And so what I did is I actually looked, I said, well, if there's an error first, check and see if it's this. If it is not equal to that, then it is something else, and I'm going to go ahead and generate my error. But if it is equal to this, oh, that's okay. It just didn't find the data. Keep moving along. So that's how you would do is you can actually look at this result set call result.txt and say, well, is it truly an error? It's being reported, quote unquote, as an error, but it's really just a condition that the database is reporting back that Alpha is treating as an error. You're given that opportunity at that moment to say, well, let me look at it and find out. And that's the most common one I found, is that you're like saying delete all from, if you do like a delete all from a table that doesn't have any data in it, you'll get this message back, even though, well, there's no data, I deleted it, it's all, everything's okay. There's a new feature though, I think, when you create your connection string, and I forget, somewhere in there, you can set it so that this particular error message doesn't occur, but I just use this, it works, and I know which situations where that usually occurs. It's usually when you're doing like deleting data in a table or something along those lines. If you do it up here, it's just going to return a empty, it's not going to, like for instance, if it doesn't find any data up here, it's just going to return an empty, set. That's why I do the double calls. But good question, appreciate that.
Very cool. Now, of course, Alpha is a low-code platform, and we have spent 50 minutes just going through code. So let's go to some low-code questions. But this is very cool stuff. It's right, exactly. You always get Alpha to do what you want it to do. So here's a just let's start with a higher level question than a more specific one. The higher level one is this person is trying to decide whether to use the grid control, which they think of as sort of a mature control that's been in alpha for a while, or the list control, which isn't quite as it hasn't been there quite as long, but they're hoping it's maturing at a fast pace. They're wondering, like, where should I start? Where should I jump into the list? Should I jump into grids? What do I use for what? We get that question a
Well,
fair amount. So
the sort of my decision-making process I go through is first, if I'm going to be mobile, I go list. If I'm targeting a mobile platform, because if you anticipate showing this on tablets and stuff, grids are non-responsive or minimal responsive. So therefore, you're going to have to redo those grids to go mobile. And so that's bad. That's more work when you could just get it done twice. The other question is, do you need edit in place? Grids have the ability to edit in place. So you can create a grid that is made up of text boxes and you can edit in place. So that's kind of handy. I mean, sometimes you just want to do that. So a grid can do that. A list, not so much. It's really not built to do edit in place. It's maturing and getting there, and eventually it may have that capability, but it's a different animal. So those are the kind of two factors I look, is that I always try to tend towards lists now, because lists look better, they're faster, they're less heavy. There's a lot of new modern capabilities that come with it. They work offline. A lot, you kind of future-proof yourself if you go with a list control. But with a grid, they are you, by mature, you're saying old, aren't you? That's just a nice way to say it's an old.
Well, I guess we're saying that. Well, no,
We'll call it the
it's not old,
AARP.
it's wise.
The AARP control is what we like to call it. But the nice thing about grids is they're very powerful. They're very easy to use. You can whip them out quickly. And if you're planning on just having it on a desktop web interface, use them. We're not going to tell you to use either one. You're just going to find that once you start to migrate to mobile, if necessary, you'll have to do some redesign work, some migration, but that may be a-okay with your particular scenario. So tend towards lists just because you're future-proofing yourself, but don't be afraid to reuse grids. They're supported, they're heavily supported, they're mature. Almost all the new features are going into list control because we're trying to drive that to full equivalency in terms of what you can do with a grid. Like, for instance, adding the mapping and other stuff, you see that all the newer features go there, but mainly because, now I can create cool with a list control, and I'll go into here and just show you real quick. Oops, on this side here. One thing that's really powerful about a list control, which I really dig, is the list control has the ability to have what are called multiple layouts. And so I can literally create a layout for desktop web, a layout for a tablet, and a layout for a mobile phone. All of them exist within the same list control. And then I can use responsive rules to say, oh, you're on a tablet, tell this list to display itself as a tablet layout versus a desktop layout. So that's really cool, because then when someone pulls it up on a tablet, they're not trying to do a lot of scrolling around to get it to work on that smaller screen space. So it gives you a lot more control. It's one of the cool things there. And the other thing about the list, which is very cool too, is that we continue to add new capabilities to it. For instance, you can do Kanbans with lists. And that can just be a different view of the same data. You can do custom, where you can write everything from scratch. And now, which we'll display again, is the new map capability, which allows you to display map data in the list controls. So I would lean lists, but again, I don't want to dissuade people, because grids are fast, man. You just put them together, boom, boom, boom. They're very mature. You can use advanced search in grids. You can use a lot of other capabilities. And, if you just know, well, this is going to be desktop web forever and ever and ever, then you're fine.
Very cool. Thanks very much. So let's talk again about grids just for a little bit more. This person is interested in calculating a summary based on values in a grid. So they've got numbers, but some of them are positive, some of them are negative, and I guess they want to get a total at the end.
Cool. Let me see if I've got a good. Oh yeah, here's a customer order grid. Let's see what
I think what they said they ran into the issue was with negative numbers, that they weren't being calculated for some reason.
Well, let's go ahead and do this.
Okay.
Here. So let's go ahead and say UX. Oh no, grid component. And I'll query my Northwind We'll select the
While you're doing that,
order.
we were firmly scolded for confusing those with Manchester United colors. I apologize. Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
just
wait. So, yeah, okay. So, what colors are these? Is this Manchester United or who is? No, it's not. Man U.
it's it.
Who's? This is
I
not
have
Man.
no idea, but it's definitely not that. Yeah,
I'm getting a
confusing.
Colt Crips and Bloods, East Coast, West Coast thing going on. Yeah.
They're very
Also, I'm going to get
emphatic.
these all these really nasty things to guides. By the way, the email is
Yeah,
guides@alphasoftware.com if you'd like to register a complaint. Dave will handle that.
I will handle them personally. Yep.
Okay, so I'm putting in here, so I've got a simple grid that goes against some numeric data here. There you go. So I'll go in here. I'm going to make this editable so we can check it out. So let's see. We'll go click OK. Do a working preview. Okay. And then what we can do is in the grid has the ability, actually, I'm sorry, I go to fields. I can go to one of these fields to say quantity here. And I can go down here and I can add summary values. So I can sit there and say, for instance, total. And then I can set a display format for that. I can add multiple ones. So now let's do a working preview. And we'll see that, oh, I think it displays only on the last page. Let me go ahead and show you that. There's a few things here. If we go there, and then I'm going to go to last, there's my total right here. Okay, so it automatically totals up. Kind of nice, very nice feature here. I'm going to go to properties, and I'm going to go to the summary values, and I think, where is it? Summary. Here it is. Okay, there's a under the summary at the property level, show on last page only. I'm going to disable that. So now what it does is it shows the total on every page. So I don't have to go to the last page to see the total. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say negative 10,000. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't insert it. What happened here? Oh, it's out of range. I can't do that big of a number. So let's do negative 1,000. No, it doesn't like that. Maybe oh, interesting. The quantity in my access, it has to be greater than 0. So that's not going to work. So let's just go back in here and go to fields. That's a drag. Because it's like, well, I have to go edit the data. Last thing I want to do is open up access and do that stuff. Who thought of this Northwinds database? Well, we'll check. But this should do a negative and positive numbers because that technically is totaling. So we'll double check it there.
Yeah, absolutely. We can look into it. If you're running into an issue, by all means, send an email to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. If you have any complaints, that's Dion, D-I-O-N, at alphasoftware.com.
Will be promptly addressed.
Promptly addressed, yeah. Let me see what else we've got.
Oh, wait, I think I might have invite items here. Oh, no, I'll have to adjust that later. We'll check that. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Ban that person. Did I say that out loud? No, we love it. We continually want this thing to be just rock solid.
I think I got most of the questions here today, and we did it in the allotted amount of time, which is, well, here's a question. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to read it out anyway. Is the Google Authenticator anyway related to Firebase authentication?
I would have to say I'm not sure. We will have to, we'll have to find some more. And I guess just at this point here, no, I don't know. It's brand new. I'm still getting my feet under it myself. So.
And there is one last thing, since we have 90 seconds left.
Yes.
Remember you were showing off that color picker control, that color control.
Yeah.
There is a feature that Scott has pointed out to us, someone who works here in graphics, that is kind of cool, and that is its ability to choose, see where it says image, to choose colors from an image. Which I think is really neat. So let's say you have an icon or something like that, and it's in ping format, and you want to know, hey, what blue did they use there? What green? I need it to match perfectly because those are my company colors. But just make what you. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Needs to be that, right?
Cool.
See what I mean? Very cool. Now, normally I would do that like in a program like Photoshop or PaintShop Pro and then come back with a hex value, but that feature is built in. So it's just kind of a cool little,
This palette thing is awesome because I
yeah.
am challenged. Obviously, as you could see from the demonstration today, I'm
Oh,
seriously challenged on style. So what you can do is work with a very, I mean, there are some cool websites that have pre-made palettes. I forget.
mhm.
It's really cool. There's this one website that has like 1,000 palettes. Now, balance this with, and actually what's kind of cool. Let me go ahead and do this. A website palette. I hope this isn't a bad sign. That'd be bad. It's something really bad up here. You have to, that would be bad. Bad. Okay. So, no, this isn't it. But, so notice this color.
Yeah.
It gives you the colors here. So you can actually grab the colors here and put them in there. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of really, and then once you have these colors together, they work well together, meaning they contrast nicely. There's a whole bunch of science behind visual elements of what is pleasing to the eye. And these people have got it in spades. So what you can do is just go grab this information. These are public, it's public information. You can grab this and say, oh, okay, go back into Alpha, set up a new palette, set up those palettes, and now those are pre-coded. So whenever you're doing something, you're doing there. And if you go into the web style builder, and I grab, let me see, do I have any local styles? Let me think. I'm in this one. Let me go here. I think I have a web style builder here. Local style, yeah. You can go in here, and then I can go to the Adjust tab here, and I can go in and take those same palettes and put them in here, and those palettes will ripple through my style. So you can use this to quickly sort of move it to a style coloring scheme you like, because this is at the high level and it'll ripple through all of the fields, etc. And then also in your project, you can, I'm sorry, I'm jumping back and forth, but you can also then set up a palette within your color scheme. So when you're working on individual things, you can then say, oh, I want to make this widget this color or something like that. And it's all and there is for its consistency throughout the whole thing. So you can use a combination of our built-in style builder with a palette and also use the web style or the color palette to kind of get everything to work together and look nicely. As you can see, there's some really good ones. It's that's kind of cool, bluish one. And you won't make soccer hooligans mad at you by going in and doing this. That's one of the key things I want to give you is that don't get soccer hooligans mad at you. So use these palettes, much better.
Very good. Thank you very much. So someone said, hey, listen, I've got a question. You keep ignoring it. And sometimes we do that and apologize. But if you do have a question and you send them to guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com, even if we don't get to it during one of these sessions, we're absolutely happy to get you the answer to it. So
Never hurts to
GUIDES at alphasoftware.com, and that's true
for
too.
getting the donation.
And we've got one. Actually, someone has submitted a pretty good one, which has to do with SQL Server stuff, and we're happy to take care of it. So send it off.
We'll jump on
have your contact information, and we'll know it. And if it's cool, we'll show it off to everyone else too. So hey, we've gone over time as always, but hey, thanks very much, Dion, for presenting. Thank you, everyone, for showing up and for asking questions and keeping our session lively. If you do have further questions, you know where to send them. Guides at Alpha Software. So take care. Have a great week. Hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.